on Prime Crime.
As I come out like this, he's taking his step.
Okay. Taking a step?
Taking his steps towards me.
A mild argument suddenly takes a violent turn.
I need a force multiplier because I don't know what's going on.
But who's responsible when someone ends up dead?
The decision-making process for a jury is an extremely difficult one, particularly in this case.
Hey there everybody, I'm Jesse Weber and welcome to Prime Crime. This is where we do a deeper dive into the most high-profile and memorable true crime cases. We talk a lot on this show about self-defense, but there's one story in particular that really asks the question, when can you use deadly force?
July 19th, 2018, Clearwater, Florida. What you're seeing is the surveillance footage of a parking lot outside of a convenience store. As you'll notice, a car pulls up. Brittany Jacobs, her boyfriend, 28-year-old Marquise McLaughlin, and their 3 children are in the car. Jacobs illegally parks in a handicap spot while McLaughlin goes into the store.
When a confrontation starts, what goes through a lot of people's minds depends on the confrontation itself.
Less than a minute later, then 47-year-old Michael Drejka pulls into the lot and then immediately begins arguing with Jacobs over where she parked.
For the most part, confrontations start verbally. And that's a problem because when a verbal confrontation is happening, normally what's going on inside someone's brain is they're thinking about what their answer is going to be. They're not listening to what the other person has to say. So that leads to further and further misunderstanding. And the more misunderstanding that happens, the more likely something physical is going to happen.
He's the one who parked illegally himself to complain about someone else parked illegally, and then engaged in a war of words where bystanders took notice and stopped and watched because it got so heated.
McLaughlin is alerted of the argument outside and leaves the store.
One of the things that fear as a primary emotion, what it can do is that it can spark anger. So he might have feared that his girlfriend was in trouble, but his emotional response wasn't one of fear. It's one of action. It's one of anger. It's one of adrenaline coursing through his system.
Suddenly, McLaughlin pushes Drejka to the ground. Drejka responds by quickly taking out a gun and firing at McLaughlin.
He did have a concealed weapons permit. And so if he believed his life was threatened, yeah, he would be allowed to pull out the gun in that situation.
McLaughlin makes his way back into the store and Jacobs desperately tries to stop the bleeding. But it's no use. Marquise McLaughlin later dies at the hospital. Now it's a question of whether this was self-defense, which is particularly interesting considering Florida is a stand-your-ground state.
Stand your ground in Florida allows people to use deadly force without having to retreat from a dangerous situation if they reasonably believe that their lives are threatened. The original intent was just to codify the castle doctrine in the law because there was a jury instruction and some concern that made it seem like we had a duty to retreat, that if someone broke into your home and threatened you, you would have to retreat before you can use deadly force in response. So in response to those concerns, the legislature passed Stand Your Ground.
After the shooting, Drejka waits for police to arrive, is brought into an interrogation room, and voluntarily agrees to speak to police without a lawyer.
We're going to take them off. You're going to be cool?
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know you. I don't know nothing about what's going on.
I know. You have my absolute words.
Okay. You understand that you have the right to remain silent? I'm going to need a verbal response.
Yes, sir.
If you will. Okay. Do you understand that anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law?
Yes, sir. Thank you for being very professional.
He was cooperative. He didn't run. He didn't flee. He gave them the gun.
The reason why Drejka didn't run away is because in his mind, he believed he was acting properly. In his mind, he still believes he is a pseudo police officer.
I did exactly what I thought I was supposed to be doing at that time, considering what was happening.
Let's get into that. First, why did Drejka approach Jacobs' car? And why was he so upset at the parking spot?
Every day there's somebody pulled in the handicap spot there, just waiting on somebody.
Okay.
I have a pet peeve about it. I said, it's not very polite to park here when there's other people who need to use this. She says, is it affecting you directly? I said, if my mother-in-law rolls in, yes, it will be.
Not only is Drejka's mother-in-law handicapped, but so is a deceased ex-girlfriend of his.
Them needing these handicap spots, and then he sees other people just taking advantage of these handicap spots. They build over time this fantasy of him becoming a civic enforcer, right? A code enforcement vigilante.
There's actually other empty parking spaces that are probably closer and have better access to the front door.
That's the only one that has access to that ramp.
In this particular situation though, if somebody can park right next to the ramp and walk around to it, doesn't really matter all that much.
I'm not sure where this is at. What's this
I'm
got to do
just
with
curious
being
as
hit
to
from
whether or not
behind?
it's worth an argument over the parking space.
Yes, I think it is.
Do you?
Yeah.
All right.
He believes himself to be the only one that can set all of these wrong things right. Whenever he sees this one thing happens, he feels compelled then to interact, to engage, and to confront.
Wouldn't it be best, you think, to call law enforcement and say, hey, there's somebody illegally parked?
It's not going to help. She'll leave.
Okay. Well, she may not
They
know.
always do.
In self-defense, you have to ask, who was the aggressor? Drejka for starting the verbal confrontation, or McLaughlin for making it physical?
He was not the initial aggressor. He didn't threaten her. He didn't put his hands on her. He didn't touch her. He simply asked her a few questions. He did nothing aggressively, physically, or even verbally. He simply asked a few questions. It escalated into a verbal argument, and then came the blindsided push.
The victim came out of the convenience store and violently pushed the defendant to the ground. But it was the defendant who then escalated it further by pulling out a weapon.
It would also be determined that McLaughlin had ecstasy in his system.
He takes this drug. It's stopping him from making more rational decisions. Had he not been on it, maybe he doesn't end up pushing Drejka.
Coming up, did McLaughlin pose a legitimate threat to Drejka?
I have no clue what he started and what his end game was. I need a force multiplier because I don't know what's going on.
What do you mean a force multiplier? What is that?
Exactly what you know what a force multiplier is.
No, sir, I don't.
After a verbal confrontation over a parking spot turned physical, Michael Drejka took out a handgun and shot Marquise McLaughlin to death. Now being questioned by Florida police, Drejka believes he was within his rights to use deadly force and has even cited the state's Stand Your Ground law.
I shoot to save my own ass, and that's that.
The question, though, is did Drejka reasonably perceive a threat to his life? Let's go back to the argument he had with McLaughlin's girlfriend, Brittany Jacobs, over parking in a handicap spot.
The thing I remember her saying is, do I have to get my man? And I said, well, what's that mean? Are we going to fight?
Okay.
But
what
I
would you-
guess so was her answer. Standing like this, talking to her.
Okay.
I was hit from right here.
So he shoved you pretty good.
No, for what it felt like is he come running at me.
Okay.
He was blindsided, the fact that he was knocked down with excessive force, and that as he was on the ground, he watched the victim hovering over him along with his girlfriend, and he felt that he needed to use excessive force at that time.
If you had just been blindsided with no idea who was attacking you, would your firearm be out next move you made?
Probably so. What did you think he was going to do?
Thinking he's going to finish what the hell he just started.
The state downplayed the fact that he hurt his arm, and if you look at his post-arrest interview, he had it in a sling.
I'm Detective Upton.
Left hand, please.
Left hand, okay.
Stand your ground, you can meet force with force, but it doesn't mean you get to shoot someone who pushes you to the ground. The other person was unarmed.
It happened so fast, and that was that.
Did he say anything to you?
Negative. Not a word.
Okay. Did you say anything to him?
No.
Like back up? or-
No.
Okay. So he made no threats that he was going to come finish his job?
It was an assumption, definitely.
Okay. So you just assumed he was going to come do that?
Any smart person would. He never said a word when he dumped me either.
Right.
Now here's where things become very important. Listen closely to what Drejka says McLaughlin did when he was on the ground.
I start drawing my weapon. As I start leveling off my weapon, he makes his next step towards me.
How many steps did he make towards you?
Just one step.
Okay.
But is that true? Did McLaughlin actually move towards Drejka? The videotape may say otherwise.
The victim had taken a step or two backwards. The defendant's best argument is that he was blindsided by a violent push, and so then he reacted. But the problem is that it wasn't just instinctual. He had time to see the victim stop and take a couple steps away, and then shot him anyways.
Really want somebody to look at those tapes. It should have everything.
Okay. What happens if I told you that I looked at the video and in no time and point does he come running up towards you? He actually takes a step back.
I would disagree.
The way the law is applied and the way we argued it, it's not so much how the general public views that moment in time, it's how he perceived that moment in time.
Did you have time to really look at him and tell that he was coming towards you?
The feet said he was coming towards me, and so did the hips.
I think Drejka believed every single thing that he was saying. Remember, when something happens that we are unexpecting, time moves differently. Our perception and everything that's going on looks different. So he probably did believe that McLaughlin was coming forward when McLaughlin was actually turning away. He probably did believe that there was no way to escape.
Did you make the decision to shoot when you pulled the gun out, or was that decision made afterwards?
Negative decision I made as soon as he moved.
Okay. Did you remember having time to think and process
No
things?
time to think.
But you
As
hadn't
soon as
made...
that gun was out, the twitch goes. That's it.
Okay.
Up next, Drejka's past sheds a whole new light on this shooting. Stay with us.
I've never been in that situation ever. I thought kicks were coming.
After shooting and killing Marquise McLaughlin in a Florida parking lot, Michael Drejka tells police he thought his life was in danger when McLaughlin shoved him after a fight over a handicap space. His interrogation revealed a lot about him, including when he was finally told what happened to McLaughlin.
Just to let you know, the gentleman you shot is deceased.
Thank you for telling me. Nobody else would give me word on that.
His interview seemed cold and calculated. Didn't seem like he had any real empathy for the victim in the case. Obviously, he didn't even react to the death of the victim.
He's felt remorse from day one, from the day I met him. But he stood by the fact that I did nothing wrong. His explanation to us about the whole interview with law enforcement was that he was still recovering from the shock of the event. I think he was grateful to know what the condition, and I think he asked. That's just how he is, very, very stoic.
But was Drejka just protecting himself that day, or looking for a fight?
I'm not after being a justice kind of guy, but when I just say something to a person about being parked there, I don't expect it to go where it went.
Drejka, though, has a documented history of road rage and allegedly pulling a gun on people. That includes getting into an argument with another man over a parking space in the same lot as the McLaughlin shooting.
So this guy is an aggressor. He's an instigator. In his mind, he is a pseudo police officer, a vigilante who's out to make sure people park in the right spaces.
There was no use of any guns. It's undisputed. He took out a camera and photographed that individual parking in the handicap and submitted it to the individual's boss. But no use of guns, no use of threats. And again, a hothead in my definition, without excusing or minimizing what happened, is someone who confronts you each and every instance with a gun, looking for a fight, looking for a reason to shoot you.
Does it ever go through your mind that when you're going up and talking to these people and informing them of them being parked in a handicapped spot, that they might not take that right? That this might go sideways a little bit?
Well, sure, but that's why I take precautions as well.
Like what kind of precautions?
I'm a very careful person and I have a permit.
Having a gun and the stand your ground law do two different things. Having the gun absolutely makes someone feel invincible. The law does something much, much worse. The law makes people believe that they will be justified in pulling their weapon and escalating a confrontation to the point where someone could actually die.
In a surprising move, the sheriff's office didn't initially arrest Drejka.
We're conducting a thorough investigation. The investigation is going to be ongoing, okay? We're not done with the investigation. There's a lot to this to place all the parts together.
When it comes to stand your ground type cases, there is a hesitancy to start making an arrest right away, because you need to investigate all the circumstances around that shooting. Plus, in this case, the sheriff indicated that he thought the defendant was within his rights to shoot based on stand your ground.
When the case was handed over to state prosecutors, though, Drejka was ultimately charged with manslaughter.
Not first-degree murder, clearly, because it was not a premeditated murder. And as far as whether it's second-degree murder, that usually involves ill will. None of that seems to apply here. This was a guy who was pushed down pretty violently and then reacted and shot dead the victim. And so it really is a manslaughter case rather than a murder case.
Drejka's attorneys had the option of first arguing at a hearing that their client was immune from prosecution under the Stand Your Ground law, but
we did not argue stand your ground. We did not file any pretrial motions. We didn't argue for immunity based on stand your ground.
And stand your ground does not give you the right to escalate a fistfight into a gunfight. You can't just start shooting unarmed people, especially those who are trying to de-escalate the situation by taking a couple steps back. And that's why the defense lawyers decided not to pursue stand your ground and instead just to make it a regular self-defense case.
When we return, Drejka goes to trial and now has to convince a jury that he acted in self-defense. Will it work?
The decision-making process for a jury is an extremely difficult one, particularly in this case. They have to weigh whether or not Drejka truly feared for his safety.
Think all court shows are the same?
We're talking about your father. Guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Think again. Judge Caprio rules with common sense.
I was having contractions. I was rushing to the hospital.
Inspector Quinn, what does justice demand? Jail?
And compassion.
I'm going to take the circumstances into consideration.
The best court experience I've had.
Clearly, Judge, he's been in a court before.
Get caught in Providence.
Hi, I'm Dan Abrams. In the exploding legal and true crime genre, Law&Crime is the only network that has it all.
Good evening and welcome.
This is a complicated case.
Don't really jump to conclusions.
Welcome to Prime Crime Tonight.
Another day of drama between both sides.
From multiple live trials daily to original and compelling programming, the Law&Crime Network is everywhere, and we invite you inside the jury box. This is Law&Crime.
As I come out like this, he's taking his step.
Okay. Taking a step?
Taking his steps towards me.
In 2019, Michael Drejka finds himself on trial in connection with the shooting death of Marquise McLaughlin. What started as heated words over a parking spot soon turned violent. McLaughlin pushed Drejka down, and Drejka fired his gun. The government argued the defendant committed manslaughter.
Mr. McLaughlin backs up as far as he can go, all the way to the car. He can't go back any further and watch that video. He starts to turn away from the confrontation. And he's shot at that time. Matter of fact, the video speaks better than I can.
While Drejka's legal team ultimately decided to not argue Florida's Stand Your Ground law, they did have to convince this jury that Drejka acted in self-defense when using deadly force.
We want you to look at the video. We want you to look at it in real time. We don't want you to look at it in slow motion. Because life doesn't happen in slow motion. Life didn't happen in slow motion for Mr. Drejka.
The jury heard all different kinds of evidence on use of force, pathology, and even a past encounter Drejka had over a handicap spot in that same lot. But there was one witness we all waited to hear from, the woman who had the initial confrontation with Drejka and who was right there during the shooting, McLaughlin's girlfriend, Brittany Jacobs.
Did the defendant shoot Marquise?
Yes.
Was that after Marquise went backwards?
Yes. I seen Marquise down there fighting for his life. So I grabbed a t-shirt and I put it toward his wound and stopped the bleeding.
You said the word, I retreated to the left and Marquise retreated. You never used the word retreat in any of your statements to law enforcement, correct?
I don't recall, but I remember telling him we was, moving back.
Fair, but you never said retreated, correct?
I don't remember.
After over 6 hours of deliberations, the jury came back with their verdict.
To the charge of manslaughter,
We, the jury, find as follows as to the defendant in this case. The defendant is guilty of manslaughter as charged.
If you start shooting, you don't get to do that under Florida law, to shoot first and ask questions later. He brandished a weapon, and then the victim took a step or two backwards to de-escalate, and then he was shot. And so, in my mind, the jury reached the proper verdict.
I think that came to the wrong decision because of all the evidence that came in, such as this prior incident involving the same parking lot where the facts were so dissimilar. So I think that this image of a hothead absolutely came into the jurors' minds. I think that the trial should have been focused simply on what happened, at the moment that he shot Mr. Blockman.
Drejka was sentenced to 20 years behind bars, and his life inside hasn't gone so smoothly.
Well, early on during his incarceration, he was attacked. I don't know if they ever discovered if it was racially motivated or if it was just a random attack. He's doing better now. He hasn't had any problems since that attack. He's in general population. He's awaiting the results of the appeal, in good spirits and hopeful that he'll get a new trial.
At the time of this taping, Drejka has appealed his case, hoping for a new trial.
The attorney for the state personally attacked my co-counsel, John Trevina.
Mr. Trevina says, well, a lot of people think this and that. That's not evidence in this courtroom. I don't care what some nut, wacko, right-wing guy thinks.
Those are some of the few examples that went on during the course of the closing arguments that I think will result in a new trial.
I think he's going to lose on appeal. The defendant had a fair trial, and the reason why he was found guilty is because he was guilty. I think the legacy of this case is that stand your ground does not allow you to bring a gun to a shoving match. Sadly, though, nothing's going to bring the victim back to life. His children will grow up without a father, but hopefully the legacy of this case will live on to prevent future tragedies from happening.
The Michael Drejka case is a fascinating study in Florida's stand your ground law, but it's also important because it recognizes how quickly a minor argument can turn into a senseless tragedy. And I think we should remember that. That's all we have for you here on Prime Crime. Leave us your comments on Twitter and Instagram with the hashtag PrimeCrime. As always, thank you for joining us, and until next time, be safe.